Yeah. Okay, let's begin a little bit. Eila hadvorim asher diber Moshe al kol Yisrael. Now, all the other parshios, Shemos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, always start with the letter Vav. The Eila Shemos. It connects all the two. But now we have Eila hadvorim, there's no letter Vav. So there are a lot of different perushim over here. Over the years, we've spoken about a lot of things that Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu said, but Hashem put the words in his mouth, or Hashem incorporated into the Torah. It's all part of the Torah, but it's a little bit different. This parsha, this whole sefer, than before. We refer to it as Mishnah Torah, a repeat of everything that Moshe taught them over the years in the desert. Although there are many new mitzvos in this sefer that we didn't have before, but they might have had it before. You know, it's interesting, Moshe started speaking now with Rosh Chodesh Shvat. He was going to speak until Zayin Adar, which is 37 days, right? Remember we talked about that last week. That's a long time to speak. You know, next time your rabbi speaks too long, don't complain. Right?
No
37
stop, right?
days.
No stop?
Well, I'm sure he slept, I'm sure he ate, I'm sure everybody took a break once in a while, but it was pretty much constant. He taught them a lot of things in those 37 days. Now, I saw somewhere very interesting that the first 4 books of the Torah are like the Tefillin Shel Rosh. The Tefillin Shel Rosh, the head Tefillin, has 4 sections to it. Okay? Like Bereshit, Shemos, Vayikra, Bamidbar. And then the 5th book, Devarim, is like the Tefillin Shel Yad. That only has 1 big scroll. It has all 4 in there, but it has 1. So it's interesting that you have 4 in the Tefillin Shel Rosh and 1 in the Tefillin Shel Yad. Together is 5, represents the 5 books of the Torah.
I would think it's the opposite because the heart contains 4 chambers.
And it's interesting that maybe it is, but yet the 4 chambers are in the head, and the 1 chamber is in the hand facing the heart. So it's interesting that you say that. You know, maybe it's trying to combine the heart and the head into one. You know, the real reason is that the head has 4 of the 5 senses. The head has speech, smell, hearing, and sight. And the hand has touch. So the head has 4, the hand has 1. That's why it's broken out that way. You know, we talk about Megillas Eicha. You know, we said Eicha, we read Megillas Eicha on Motzei Shabbos on Saturday night. You know, in the olden days, I mean, not that much today, but in the olden days, nobody ever brought home the Eicha. They always had these very cheap, they sold them for 50 cents or $1, Eicha booklet that was on paperback. And afterwards, they would gather them all together, tie them all up, and put them in shemos. Because to take it home would mean, oh, why are you taking it home? For next year. It means you don't believe that Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. So they never printed Megillas Eicha or the Kinos hardcover. Now they do. Now you go to the store, you can get it hardcover. But in the olden days, Megillas Eicha or Kinos was read, you know, on paperback, and they would leave it in shul. They never took it home. There's a question. Many people read the Megillot on cloth, on parchment, like Megillat Esther, and they bring down that a lot of people say Megillat Eicha you should not write on cloth. Because if you write it on cloth, again, it's like you're going to keep it for a long time. And let's say you do read it off cloth, do you make a bracha? Normally we make a bracha when we read off cloth. But some people say that Megillat Eicha, maybe you should make a bracha. Because again, you don't want it from year to year. So much of how we approach Tisha B'Av is of the mind, of our approach, of our thinking, the way we look at life, more than anything else. Now, you know, we will talk a little bit about, you know, we talk about Nosei Ba'ol Chaveiro. Now, I'll just bring down, you know, Rabbi Fran was talking about this a little bit, not this time. Rabbi Fran spoke this year, but he didn't speak about this. He spoke about this years ago. He had once said, right, I'd heard this before from many other sources. You know, there's a story in the Gemara, Gittin, which goes through the entire section of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the first and the second, there was a story all about Bar Kokhba's rebellion. And we know that Bar Kokhba had a certain amount of support from Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva believed in Bar Kokhba until the rebellion took a negative turn, and then he, of course, clearly he was a Moshiach. One of the last battles with Bar Kokhba that the Romans fought was in the city of Beitar. Now, Beitar was an enormous city. There's a dispute how many people lived there. Thousands, hundreds of thousands, 1 million, there are talks about. And the Romans slaughtered everyone, men, women, and children. The Haruge Beitar were known that the bodies were strewn all over the battlefield, all over the city. The city was destroyed. And the Romans wouldn't let anybody go bury the bodies. So the bodies were left on the field, and they remained on the field. There's a debate how many years, 4 years, 7 years, longer. At any rate, eventually the Jews came back to Beitar, and they buried the bodies. They found the bodies and they buried them. Kever Yisrael, we call it. And there was a miracle. What was the miracle?
Didn't decay.
The bodies didn't decay. Normally, after a few years of laying on the ground, the bodies would be subject to the elements. And in this case, the bodies didn't decay. The bodies remained complete, whole, as if they had just died. The Chachomim were so taken aback by this, they were so inspired by this, they created a new bracha. The bracha was Hatov v'Hametiv. Hashem who does good and keeps doing good. And we make this bracha when you buy, let's say, a new car, according to some opinions, when you have a child. When you have a baby girl, make a bracha Hatov v'Hametiv. If you're eating your Shabbos meal, and during the meal someone brings you a better quality wine, so you don't make a bracha Borei Pri Hagavan because you made that a Kiddush, but you make a bracha Hatov v'Hametiv. Who brought me a much better quality wine. So it raises the question, what does Hatov v'Hametiv mean? That Hashem does good. So here you are, you're coming to a field of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dead bodies. Now you tell me, is that the place to make brachos? And then, what do they do? Where do they put this bracha primarily? In Birkat HaMazon. Hu heitiv, hu meitiv, hu yetiv lanu. We make the bracha Hatov v'Hametiv every time we do Birkat HaMazon. Here we are at the table, we just had a good meal, we washed, we had bread, we make hamotzi, we make Birkat HaMazon, and we say Hatov v'Hametiv Hashem. You know what? It's so great at our table that we just had such a good meal that you allowed us to bury all those million Jewish people. It seems so bizarre. It seems so strange that would exist at that time, and that they would make a bracha like that. If I was making a bracha to Hashem, I said, you know what the better bracha would be? That they shouldn't have died in the first place. That the Romans should never have been there in the first place. That Jews should be living. Just imagine going to the concentration camp and seeing hundreds of thousands of dead bodies and the bulldozers burying them and say, oh, wow, that's fantastic. Hatov v'Hametiv. Nobody would say that bracha in the concentration camp. So the Meforshim, they explain.
Isn't it that you bury the person is another better to be buried than not being buried?
Well, when we bury a person, we don't make a bracha Hatov v'Hametiv. And it wasn't that they got buried that we made the bracha, it's the fact that they didn't decompose. But it's still a bracha made on a graveyard where there's hundreds of thousands of dead bodies. It seems so strange that that's the place that the Chachamim were inspired to make a bracha. So Rabbi Ephraim answered, and this is a well-known answer, that at the time of the Churban Beit HaMikdash, the prevailing attitude amongst people was Hashem abandoned us. Hashem divorced us. Hashem rejected us. There is no God anymore. God and the Jewish people are now separate. And that's how people walked around, and that's how they believed, and it created a tremendous sense of loss and depression. God no longer is connecting to the Jewish people. When they came into the city of Beitar, and they saw hundreds of thousands of Jewish bodies had not decomposed, it sent the following message: God is with us. God protected all these bodies. That means as angry as God was, and as many lives that were lost, and the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, you think God has left you, you just hidden, that's all. But for him to make such a miracle, for the Haruge Beitar, it could only mean one thing: he's there. He's there, and he's always been there, and he always will be there, and he never left us. And therefore, they were so moved by this. The first time in years, they felt God's presence. Imagine a person who feels rejected, and all of a sudden he comes to shul and some type of siman, and he feels Hashem's love. You know, Hashem's love is there. How would you react? Would you be sad? No, you'd be thrilled. You'd be happy. You'd make a kiddush. You would you would get called up to the Torah, and you would donate money. So it's as if to say that they were able to recognize the existence of Hashem, and because of that, they said Hatov v'Hametiv. So that's what it means. Imo anochi b'tzara. I'm with you in your greatest pain. I'm with you. That's what's nosei be'ol chavero. It means that you always are there. When I speak about this in the future, I'll tell you. But I remember I heard a story that there were some women in Borough Park that whenever they see a Hatzolah ambulance pass by with the lights on, whatever they're doing, they stop and they say a kapitel tehillim. Now, what do they say? They say Shira Malos Eso Einai Lahori Me'ayin Yovo Edri. They say it's tehillim. Why? Because someone called Hatzolah means someone is in trouble. But you don't know the person. I don't have to know the person. If someone called Hatzolah, it's got to be a Jewish person. Goyim don't call Hatzolah. And they call Hatzolah because there's an emergency. So I don't have to know the person. Someone's in trouble. A Jew's in trouble. They stop what they're doing for 5 minutes and they say tehillim. And that's an amazing thing. That's an amazing, amazing thing. It's a state of mind. It's an approach. Someone is in trouble. I have to help. Not always can you help. You know, sometimes there are tragedies. Rabbi Ephraim brought this down. I had heard this, that Rav Pam once went to make a shiva call to a family who lost a son, a young boy. And he came into the room, and he didn't say a word to the parents. He had nothing to say. What do you say to parents if their child dies? There's nothing to say. He was sad, he cried, and then he said, Mochim Menachem, and he left. And people said that it was very comforting. Why? Because words don't mean anything. What are you supposed to say? Oh, I know why he died. Nobody knows why he died. Why did this tragedy happen? Nobody knows why this tragedy happened. But Rav Pam sat there and cried with him. So he sent the message. You know what it is? You lost a child, I feel your loss. You cry, I'm crying also. I didn't even know the child. I cry anyway, because you're in pain. When a Jew feels that someone else is in pain with them, they don't have to say anything. It's just showing that you share their pain. That's what it is. That's what it means, nosei ba'ol chavero, that you join into the pain. And those are some of the lessons from Tisha B'Av. And I think I'm developing a whole theme about this with a bunch of different stories, and maybe I'll speak about it on R.Rabbi, maybe I'll speak about it on Shavuos night. I'm not sure next time I'm going to introduce this topic, but maybe I'll speak about it before Rosh Hashanah. I'm preparing a whole thing. I already have about 3 or 4 pages prepared already. But that was this concept where sometimes people just want you to care. People just want to feel like they're not alone in the world. Sometimes that's very, very important. Anyway, Moshe mentions all the different places the Jewish people sinned.
7 places.
Right. And he mentions it beremes, although he will go into detail, and the people he's talking to didn't commit these sins.
Yeah.
That means this was the generation that left Egypt who died in the Midbar. Okay, the women were there, Shevet Levi was there, but by and large, the women in Shevet Levi didn't do these sins. They weren't part of the monogamy. Or else they would have died. They weren't part of the Chet Egel, or else they would have died. So, they weren't part of Korach or the Man or the complaints, or else they would have died. So he's giving them a lesson of all the things that went wrong in the last 40 years, and most of the people there just remember the stories that they heard from their fathers or their grandfathers.
New generation.
Right, because it was a new generation.
Before he died, he said, right?
Right. Then he said, we traveled 11 days from Chorev. So what is Chorev? What? Har Sinai. So Chorev is one of the places that Har Sinai was called. I'm looking around, I think I photocopied down the Medrash itself as to where Har Sinai was. Here, there's a whole thing here. Let's take a moment just to read this and to understand it. It says in the Gemara in Shabbos says, "Omalei Hume Rabbon Rav Kahana, Mish Mialoch Mai Har Sinai." Do you know how this mountain got the name Har Sinai? Omalei Har Shenasu Bo Nisim LiYisrael. Sinai means miracles. It's the mountain where miracles were done for the Jewish people. He didn't like that answer. It should have been called Har Nisoe, not Sinai. So it says Har Shenase Simin Tov LiYisrael. It was a mountain that good things happened. He says, no, I don't like that either. Simonoi, it should have been called. Finally, someone says it was a mountain that hatred came into the world. Who hated the Jews? The non-Jews. Because the Jews got the Torah, and the Jews then claimed to be closer to Hashem, and the non-Jews who believed that their idols were gods, and therefore they believed they were closer to God than you were, weren't happy. They weren't happy to hear that your God is bigger than my God, and you're closer to your God than we are to your God. So Har Sinai created anti-Semitism. The source of anti-Semitism is Har Sinai. Okay? Not exactly.
Correct, Sinai or Sinai?
Well, Sinai in Hebrew, Sinai in the translation. And V'hainu d'Omer Rav Yossi b'Rav Chanina, this is what Rav Yossi and Rav Chanina said, Hey Shemos Yesh Lo. The mountain had 5 names. You know what the 5 names? Har Sinai is 1. Chorev is 2. Give me some other names.
Gavnuna.
What?
Gavnuna.
No, I don't see it. You're close. One is called Midbar Tzin, the desert of Tzin. Tzin means Shenitztavu Yisrael Alov. The Jews were commanded on that mountain to do things right or wrong. Midbar Kodesh, Shenitzkachu Yisrael Alov. They became holy at that mountain. Midmor Kadmus, that's what maybe you were referring to. Shenitna Keduma Olav. It was chosen above all other mountains. Midbar Poron was called Midbar Poron. Shaporu V'rovu Ala Yisrael. The Jewish people multiplied. They were allowed afterwards. They went home. They got married. They had children. And Midbar Sinai, that hatred came down to the world. So then the Gemara says, okay, we have 5 names: Sin, Kodesh, Kadmuz, Poron, and Sinai. And we all know what is Har Sinai. But then the Gemara says, what?
What's a Paran?
Poron means that they were fruitful and multiplied. They had children. Then the Gemara says, what was its real name? Before the Jews got there, before all these things happened, this mountain was there for hundreds of years, maybe 1,000 years. What was the mountain's name, its real name? Was it K2? Or was it Mount Everest? What was it called? Pikes Peak? What was it called? So the Gemara says Chorev Shem. It was called Chorev. What does Chorev mean? That's what the Gemara wants to know. Har Chorev Sheyordor Churva La'akum Olav. It was called Har Chorev because destruction descended on the world from there. That means it created destruction of the non-Jewish world.
That's mean law, like law, destruction.
Destruction and resolution. To destroy.
To destroy.
Destroy.
No.
So change it, still just destroying the nations, no?
So it destroys the world. So everybody wants to know, what do you mean by it destroys the world? What does that mean, it destroys the world?
Once it already happened.
So the Be'er Yosef says, we understand Chorev to be Har Sinai, we got that, and it causes ruin, Chorva, descended to the nations on Sinai. So what does that mean? And, so...
The world was, the destruction was already happening when the flood.
Yeah, so it had nothing to do with Har Sinai. So why is it called Chorev? So it brings down, after the wars of Sichon and Og, the battles ushered in a policy of destruction of the 7 nations. So why did the Jewish people conquer Eretz Yisrael and destroy the 7 nations and wipe them out, even though they could have left and they didn't? So he says, because the Torah said so. So there were many nations, Sichon, Og, other nations, Amori, Prizi, Kanani, all got destroyed. Why did the Jews destroy them? Midian got destroyed. Why did Midian get destroyed? Because the Torah said so. Hashem said to the Jewish people, destroy Midian.
Oh, okay.
So he says, this book is a book of war. It's a book of destruction. It tells the Jewish people, who to kill and how to kill them.
It's instructions.
It's instructions to destroy. So the Gemara says, the Be'er Yosef says, that's Chorev. That is Chorev. That's why it's called Chorev. So it's very, very interesting, that it should be, what?
Why they changed after?
Well, it got changed because that was not the purpose of the Torah. The purpose of the Torah was not given to give us instructions of how to destroy those nations that don't believe. We don't have the concept, you don't believe in God, you're an infidel, and therefore we have to kill you. That's not a Jewish approach, There are other religions who have that approach. We will go there. So we're not going to go there, but that's not our approach. So it's interesting, Chorev, Chorva. In the old city of Yerushalayim, there was a shul there that was destroyed by the Jordanians, or maybe before. It's called the Chorva shul. That's what it's called, the destroyed shul. And many people go there and daven because it's an ancient shul that was destroyed. It's called the Chorva shul. I think they fixed up a little bit.
Where is it?
What?
Where is it?
In the old city of Yerushalayim, in the Jewish quarter. There are many things that have been rebuilt in the Jewish quarter. There's a lot of excavations going around. But you have there the Chorva shul. You could daven, you have David HaMelech's kever there. You could, you have Har Zion there.
They closed the wall today.
Yeah, because
they fall down through the wall. They say that.
Well,
Bad condition.
by where the Reform daven.
I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, somewhere with the Reform daven. That's what I heard.
Also separate place?
Everybody has a separate place.
They divided
It's a wall that separates everything. It just, it is what it is. But it's just interesting, the whole concept of Chorev, which is really not what we believe in today. Anyway, here from the Shmuz, Rabbi Tzion Shafir, he talks about criticism. Moshe gave Mussar to the Jewish people. We talked about this before. They asked the question, why Moshe waited till now?
He lost money.
So he says he learned from Yaakov. From Yaakov, we don't give Mussar early in life. We give Mussar at the very end of a person's life. So it's not to embarrass them. The Gemara says that Rashi says that Yaakov didn't want to give Mussar to Reuven right away because he was afraid that if he would have given Mussar to Reuven for mixing up the beds, Reuven would have said, I don't need this, and he would have gone to Esav and joined Esav.
It's not better for you to teach your child.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, right?
Yeah.
Here, Yaakov was afraid to tell Reuven what you did was wrong until the very end of his life, because he was afraid Reuven would simply throw up his hands and say, well, I need you. I have people I can go to. So you're asking a good question. Here you come to your children. Your children, you have an obligation to be mechanech them, to educate them, to teach them, to guide them. And hopefully children who are given a certain amount of training and you don't spoil them will appreciate what you do. The old term is children enjoy discipline. They want to know what's right and wrong. They want to do the right thing. Children by nature are very selfish. When they're a little baby, when they want something, they scream and yell and they cry. That's you have to train them to grow up, to go out of that. So Reuven, it says that Rashi says that he learned from Yaakov to rebuke them far from towards the end of his life. And he brings down, of course, the famous rule of criticism. 3 rules of criticism. The first rule is don't do it. The second rule is don't do it. And the third rule is don't do it. The 3 rules. Don't do it because it hurts. Don't do it because it distances people. And most of all, don't do it because it doesn't work. Criticism. When you tell someone, very often when you come up with comments about everything you did wrong, it's not helpful. If you can come up with suggestions how you can do things better, that's helpful. But to simply say what you did was wrong, it's not really, really helpful. And that's really what the problem is. So here Moshe references these things just by name, Di Zahav, the Chet Egel. He doesn't have to say anything. People who know the story know the lessons. So he was hoping that just mentioning the places was enough. But then Moshe does go into detail. He goes through the Mei Meriva, and he goes through the Meraglim, and he goes through in this week's Parsha, he goes again through Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi, Sheva, Menashe, and all the travels that they went to, and everything else. It's a very powerful Parsha. And next week, Vas Chanun is even more powerful. Very beautiful, very poetic, the way it says. But, he goes into tremendous amount of detail over here, and he explains to them exactly about Lot and all the different countries, and Sichon and Og, and what he conquered and what he didn't conquer, and how they divided the land, and Mochab and Menashe and everything else. He has everything here. He goes through all of that in more than anything else.
Maybe the best way was to wait a last moment to say because they know this generation already make a sin. What's the point to talk to them right now? Anyway, they're gonna die.
Right, the other generation.
Yeah,
right.
That's why maybe he spoke at the end of the.
And I'm sure the other generation did their teshuvah. They were not going to Eretz Yisrael. And there are a lot of things that tshuva in itself doesn't accomplish until death comes. And the only ones that survived were the last 15,000 because Aaron died Rosh Chodesh Av and he was Mechaper for the last 15,000.
Because of the Ephraim, yeah.
Right. So, things, it's interesting how things have gotten as far as they did. Okay, so, then it says that Moshe gave them a brocha. He says, we created the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was there to help guide you. But I give you a bracha that you should have 1,000 more, right? Hashem should give you 1,000 more. So the Chassam Sofer explains that Moshe was testing them. Why did they want children? Was it because children were useful and they could do things around the house like cleaning and shopping and washing and drying? Or was it because children carry on the Torah's Hashem? So Moshe was trying to say to them, if you want children to be slaves around the house, you don't need 1,000. 5 children's enough. 3 children are enough. But if you want to carry on the Torah, then the more you have, the better. So that's what Moshe was giving to them. He says, I'm going to give you 1,000. And their reaction was, that's all? That's not enough. We want more. So Moshe says, you're right. I give you more than you can count in the heavens, more stars in the heavens, Then we get to the bracha. So, it means that he was trying to give them much more than what they needed and even more sense. We talk about Moshe Rabbeinu, he appointed the Sanhedrin. It's interesting, how were the Sanhedrin chosen? How were these 70 people chosen? Who were these 70 people? You know what the answer was? They were the ones who, when the Egyptians got angry, wanted to beat somebody. So they beat these 70 people. So when you take someone else's whip, you're noseb el chavero, right? You suffer for your friend. Guess what happens? You become part of the Sanhedrin. Now what's shocking about that is that in order to be a member of the Sanhedrin, you didn't have to have a strong back that got whipped. You had to be a Talmud Chacham. You had to know the entire Torah.
Yeah.
So these guys got whipped and beaten. What made them Talmidei Chachamim? So they say that Hashem gave them the Torah as a gift. Overnight, these people woke up, they knew all of Shas, all the Rambam, all the Torah, all the Shulchan Aruch.
So they probably had the same thing with Moshe Rabbeinu?
So almost. They literally woke up the next day and they knew everything.
Like the information downloaded.
They could download it overnight, correct. Their hard drives were reformatted.
It can be like a Moshe Rabbeinu. Only Moshe
Sounds like
Well, it
Well,
wasn't.
maybe-
They weren't necessarily Nevi'im, although Eldon and Meidan said Nevuah. So that'll be part of my speech when I talk. You know, it's amazing. What
This
made
miracle.
them to be chosen was, Rashi says, because the Egyptians beat them. That means this Jew didn't finish his job, so the Egyptian got angry. So who did he take it out on? The boss, the person in charge. And these guys were the bosses that got beaten. So because they got beaten, they became Talmidei Chachamim overnight.
Basically, the average Jew was there for 86 years in slavery.
Yeah, and so they got beaten a lot. They say that Hashem added the letter Hey to Yosef's name. There's a pasuk in Tehillim, Yehosef. That when Hashem added the letter Hey to Yosef's name, Yosef knew all 70 languages. That's how Yosef knew how to speak Egyptian and all the other languages. He had that gift. It was a gift from Hashem. That letter Hey was like what we call the Rosetta Stone. That's that program that teaches you languages. So Yosef knew what language.
The same miracle gonna happen when Mashiach comes, I think.
That Mashiach will speak all 70 languages?
I think so.
Probably. If Mashiach is going to deal with Jews all over the world,
You have to know.
he has to know something, you know? It's going to be interesting.
Is Mashiach going to come like he has to be born, or it's like Moses descending?
Well, that's a big question. You know, there's a famous Gemara that says that when Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos in the days of the Gemara, and everybody said, well, we'll keep it on Sunday, there was one of the people, I think Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, says, no Tisha B'Av this year. He says, why not? Because the tradition is that Mashiach is going to be born on Tisha B'Av. So once Tisha B'Av already passed, it was Shabbos, there's no need for Tisha B'Av. Mashiach is born, Mashiach is going to come. We don't need Tisha B'Av. They didn't agree to him. Lo hodu lo chachamim, the Gemara says. They kept Tisha B'Av anyway. You know?
By the majority.
Right, they go by the majority, so they kept Tisha B'Av anyway. But Rabbi Yehuda Nasi believed that. Now, what does that mean? It means that either Mashiach is here, but he's just hidden. We just don't know who he is. He could be the guy sitting right next to you. He just has to announce himself when he's ready, or when you're ready.
Is he supposed to have like some kind of powers, like to go against war against the other nations?
So, you know what, according to, I think, the Rambam, he doesn't have any special powers, other than he'll bring a universal recognition of Hashem. How he'll accomplish that, I don't know. He's not going to necessarily move mountains. The force is not going to be with him. He's not going to have a lightsaber or whatever it is.
Did Donald Trump was considered the Mashiach already?
What?
Donald Trump.
No.
I don't know about that.
I know somebody did like translated his name into Hebrew.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it says, and it's like Commander Moshiach and
Something like that. I heard that already. But,
They talk all
again, you know,
people talk.
what's going to
But
be...
he did move the embassy to Jerusalem, making a statement.
He started to do things
So
that
it's
the
a
government
sign.
said that
It's a
they would
sign.
do. Correct. You know, but listen,
The government.
Mashiach is an unusual creation that who, what, where. You know, there were times that the Gemara said Hashem wanted to make Chizkiyahu Moshiach, and the battle with Sancheriv Gog and Magog, but the world wasn't ready, or he didn't sing songs the way he was supposed to. Nebuchadnezzar sang more songs than even put David HaMelech to shame. You know, what these all things mean, nobody knows. But, you know, you never know.
Just wait
You
and pray.
never know. According to the Gemara, people wanted Mashiach, they just didn't want to live through the generation that Mashiach was coming in because it was so painful. The Chevlei Mashiach.
A lot of laundry.
Yeah, they didn't want to be there for when he came. They just wanted him to come, and that would be the end of that. And I don't think they wanted to be there during the process.
A lot of wash up.
You know, on the other side, you know, a lot of people are doing tshuva now than ever before. They're more balei tshuva. It's a sign of something. I'm not sure what, but it's a sign of something.
That's right.
Anyway, there's a story here that's brought down in the Torah Tavlin a few years back, and the story goes as follows. The story goes that by Moshe Green, a Rebbe at Yeshiva Shar Yoshev, something that inspiring story that happened to him. He was living in New York, and he knows that New York is very tough on cars. If you drive a car in New York, between the potholes and debris on the roads, you know, tires get punctured, rims get bent. And he was on his way home, and what happened was his tire hit something hard and popped, went flat, and that was it. He pulled over, took out my cell phone, and I called AAA, gave my location, and then I sat back and waited. It took about an hour and a half before a Latino man in his mid-60s pulled up and struck behind me. He got up, he says, "Hello, my name is Donnie." Extended his hand, and he says, and he started to speak to me in Yiddish. He uttered a few Yiddish phrases. Here's a Latino guy, a Spanish guy. So Rabbi Green said to him, "Are you Jewish?" And he said, "No, not at all." So he laughed. He says, "You're not Jewish and you speak Yiddish? That's very unusual." I have this all the time happen to me. Non-Jewish people speak to me in Yiddish also. So the truck driver looked at him and he said to him, "I have a rabbi. My rabbi is Yoel Teitelbaum from Williamsburg." So he says, "Yoel Teitelbaum, that's the Satmar Rebbe." How does a Latino person, how does a guy, let's say from Mexico, have the great Hasidic rabbi from Satmar as his rabbi? How did he become your rabbi? So he says as follows. He says that he's a retired New York City Police Department cop. He's a retired police officer. And he was assigned to protect the Satmar Rebbe, you know, from his Hasidim, from outsiders. He was like a bodyguard, and he was like a retired police officer, so he got the job. So he says, you know, and he taught me how to tell who's real, who's not real. Anybody could grow beard and side locks. I had to know the difference between the two of them. Anyway, so he would give me all these instructions. And his wife was very kind to me. On Friday, she would give me some chunt or some kugel. You know, I got to eat all the good food. So Donnie, this guy, this police officer, said to Rabbi Green, he says, "Do you know what a Yiddish cup is?" Yiddish cup means a Jewish brain. So of course he says, "Well, you know what it means to me? It means to me that Jews are supposed to be smart and very clever." I says, "Yeah, that's generally what it means." He says, "And it's true that you guys used to live in Israel, the capital was Jerusalem, you had a beautiful temple." He said, "Yeah." He says, "Don't you once a year, you know, talk about the destruction of the temple? And that was over 2,000 years ago." He says, "That's true. You seem to know a lot of things." He says, "Well, let me ask you a question." He says, "If you guys are supposed to be so smart, and you have this Yiddish cup, how come your temple is still destroyed after 2,000 years? How come you haven't figured a way to get it back?"
Good question.
And he said, I looked at him and I had no answer. He says, here's this non-Jewish guy And he turns around and he says to me, you know, you claim to be so smart, you know so much, and yet the temple was destroyed because you can't get along. And here I got to be a bodyguard for the Satmar Rebbe. Why does a Jew need a bodyguard? I mean, who's going to do him in? Other Jews, right? So why? Why are they Litvish Jews and Hasidic Jews and modern Jews and religious Jews and non-religious Jews? He says, you know, you guys are supposed to be so smart. You're supposed to have this this Yiddish cup, as we say. Why, he says, why is it
It's difficult to deal with emotions, that's right.
2,000 years and you haven't figured it out? Okay?
Probably.
You know, yes.
Possible today in the physical world, Jews will be together, spending money and putting together in one shot. It's possible to do
Anything is possible, but likely, I'm not sure if I would take bets on it, but anything is possible.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another story. Mordechai Kamenetsky brings this story down. He says there was a Rebbe in the Yeshiva of Philadelphia called Rabbi Mendel Kaplan. He was born in 1913 and he passed away in 1985. So he was 72 years old when he passed away, which is really not old, you know. It sounds old, but it's not that old. Anyway, he would conduct a morning class every morning for a select group of students in learning Musar. That's what he did. And he studied the works of Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, who was the mashkiach of the Mir Yeshiva in Europe and eventually in Shanghai. And they would meet every morning after Shacharis, and they would talk about, they would learn Musar for 20 minutes, half an hour. You know what Musar is, how to be a better person. One night, a heavy snow covered Philadelphia. As the boys trudged into the classroom, they were dazzled by the view of the breaking sunlight over the white blanket of snow all over the frozen ground. But a lot of the boys made it to the yeshiva, and they came inside the classroom, and there was Reb Mendel Kaplan sitting at his desk wearing his boots, his gloves, his coat, everything. So they said, Rebbe, you know, you're inside. We're here. Let's go learn Musar. He says, no, today we're going to learn real Musar. Until now, we were learning from books. Today, we're going to learn the real stuff. And he said to the boys, put on your boots and your jackets back on. And he had 6 shovels in the corner. He gave each one of the boys a shovel, and they went outside and they shoveled the snow between the Beis Medrash and the dormitory, the Beis Medrash and the dining room. And when they got back in, he says, you know, it's one thing learning about how to be good to your fellow Jew, how to be good to your neighbor. But today we did more than learn. We really applied what we learned, you know, because there was a lot of snow. And people couldn't get out of the dormitory and make it to the Beis Medrash without going knee deep in snow. And from there they couldn't get to the, you know, to the dining room. Have you ever had snow? I mean, I don't know how much snow you have to shovel in your life. By me, if you've been to my home, I have a big walk, and then I got to shovel the driveway. I have a big driveway, then I got to shovel all the way to the side of the house because my office is in the back. It takes sometimes hours to shovel that snow. It's a lot of snow.
It's nothing compared to Russian snows.
Compared to what?
Russian snows.
Well, I'm not saying the American snows are.
I don't know the other states, but New York is not.
You're right, but sometimes you have 10 or 12 inches. It's a lot of snow to shovel. I have a former student of mine who loves me very deeply. He has one of these 4x4s with a snow plow in the front of it. I guess all-terrain. He just revs it up, and he just comes down the block and just shovels me out. He just, but because, you know, and then all my neighbors call me and says, "What's that? Who's that guy? Can you do my walk? Can you do my walk?" So he got tired of me asking him. So now he does the entire street by us, on the sidewalk, and he goes to the other side. So at least the sidewalks are done. So here you have 10, 12 inches of snow when it's a blizzard, and he does the entire sidewalk. And then afterwards you have to get out of your house. You know, you can't do your small walk up, that you have to do yourself. But the driveways he can do. That thing is You know, what you takes 3 hours to do, he takes 3 minutes to do. You know, it's just, he just does it in a way that is unbelievable. Yes, you're gonna say something.
No, you mean Hesed.
He does, he
There's some
does,
Spanish people,
yes.
or some kids like the snow shoveling houses.
Yeah, they make money. You get $20, you know, each time, you know, they do a house. I probably give a guy 20. I should do it also. Because it's really, it's very physical. You know, and
It's not worth it.
correct, no, it's not, sometimes it's not worth it. When I go out there and do it, all my neighbors scream at me. I'd rather they shuffled for me instead of screaming at me. They scream, they say, you shouldn't be shuffling. I said, you're right. No. So I end up shoveling, you know, shoveling. Anyway, one more Hasidic story here. I got another one over here. It says, above of a Chassid, Bovov is another, the Bovov Rebbe is a great rabbi. Rabbi Halberstam was a well-known, respected rabbi. We'll end with this one. He once hired a black painter to paint his house. A Chassid, a Bovov hired a black painter to paint his house. And as his painter was setting up, he noticed a picture of the Rebbe hanging on the wall. So he looks at that picture, and the black guy says, "Hey, you know my rabbi." So the chassid says, "What are you talking? That's your rabbi?" He says, "Yeah, Rabbi Halberstam. He's my rabbi. I go to him all the time. He's my rabbi." "Are you Jewish?" "No, I'm a black guy. I'm not Jewish." You know. So he says, "Well, what do you mean he's your rabbi?" He says, "He's the real deal." I said, "What do you mean by he's the real deal?" He says, "He hired me once to paint his dining room. When I arrived in the morning, he greeted me with a warm good morning. Then he asked me, did I have breakfast yet? Now the truth is, I woke up late, so I didn't have a chance to have breakfast, so I didn't want to be late for the appointment. So I said to him, no, Rabbi, I didn't have a chance to eat. He says, what? You can't work without breakfast. And he sat me down at the kitchen table, and he made for me eggs and toast and orange juice. He gave me a whole breakfast. Once I had eaten, I began plastering the walls to prepare them for the paint. The rabbi came over to me and says, your work is excellent, almost too perfect. Don't make it look too perfect. Since the temple was destroyed, we always have a little remembrance that the temple was destroyed. Nothing should be too perfect. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to do it over 100 times. Whatever you do is fine. Just make it look good enough. He says, I've been to other people's houses. They look my work over with a microscope, you know. If it's not perfect, do it over. And they never give me breakfast, and they never say good morning to me, or anything like else. This rabbi, anything I do was fine. Every day I got breakfast. He let me stop for lunch. He made sure I had supper. This guy's a real rabbi. He's my rabbi. He's my rabbi. He's the real deal, you know. He's the real deal. You know, you talk about sinas chinam ben adam mechavero. You know, it's not a license. You know, it's not between Jew and Jew alone. You know, it involves Jews and non-Jews. It involves everybody. He's the real deal. The Bov of the Rebbe cared about another human being. That's the lesson. You know, sinas chinam is not just caring about another human being. Is what the lesson's all about. No matter who he is. Have a good night, everybody. Take care. All the best to you guys.
Good night.
Have a good day.
You can turn off.
You're welcome, sir.
Good to see you.